Section 5.5, Multicellular Life. Multicellular organisms need interactions among different cell types in order for the organism to live. So if we're looking at from the least organized, that would be at the cellular level. Okay, so it goes cells, and cells will make up tissues, and tissues will make up organs, and organs will make up organ systems, and organ systems would make up the organism. Okay, so definition, tissues are groups of cells that work together to form a similar function. Organs, groups of tissues, so now they get a little bit more complex, that work together to form a specific function or set of related functions. And organ systems are organs that carry out similar functions, helping an organism to maintain homeostasis. So looking at this is an individual cardiac or heart cell. A bunch of these guys together are going to form the tissue of the heart, okay, which would be here. The tissue will make up the organ called the heart. And the heart is part of the circulatory system where it's connected to blood vessels, both arteries and veins, to pump blood throughout the organism. Our young football star over here. So an organism, multicellular organism, is going to need specialized cells that carry out specific jobs or functions in order for the entire organism to live. It'll depend on certain cells to do certain jobs. Like humans, we have bone cells, nerve cells, muscle cells, blood cells. All these different things work together to keep this whole organism called the human being alive. The way that happens is through this process of cell differentiation, process by which unspecialized cells develop into their mature forms and functions. Okay, we'll talk more about these unspecialized cells in a bit, but every cell in an organism will have the same DNA. Okay, so it's got the complete genomic library, all the instructions in every cell to do literally anything for that organism. But each cell type, or each type of cell, only uses the specific genes, those sections in the DNA, that it's going to need to carry out its specific function from its specialized job. The cell differentiates among the genes using only the ones it needs and not using the ones it does not. So, again, specialized cells perform specific functions. This is a developing embryo. Now, right now, all these cells are relatively the same. It's just a big ball of cells, right? It started with a fertilized egg, then they divide and divide and divide and divide and divide. Okay, so eventually these things are going to start forming different layers, and it's the cell's location within the embryo, or this developing embryo, determines how it's going to differentiate. Those cells in the outer embryonic layer will form the skin and nervous system, because that's the outer part of our body. The middle layer will be the bones, muscles, kidneys, inner layer of skin, and the inner layer will form the internal organs. And it all depends on where these cells are in this big ball of cells. When it starts folding in and forming the different germ layers, where they end up is what they will develop into. Now remember, they all have the same DNA, so they have the potential at this point to develop into anything. It isn't until they start getting their specialized instructions that they actually start developing into these specialized cells that would make up the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm of the organism, the outer, middle, and inner layers of the organism. Stem cells can develop into different cell types. Stem cells are unique body cells that have the ability to divide and renew themselves for long periods of time, or remain undifferentiated in form, or develop into a variety of specialized cells. When a stem cell divides, it's either going to form two stem cells or one stem cell and one specialized cell. Okay, so it has the ability to do all of this. Stem cells are classified by what ability they have to develop into differentiated cell types. Okay, so potent is a Latin word meaning to be able to. Okay, so this first type, totipotent, would be a fertilized egg, And these things are able to turn into any type of cell. Okay? Pluripotent embryonic stem cell, so this would be like from that big ball of cells, okay? Almost any other cell except the totipotent stem cell, which comes from the fertilized egg. Multipotent would be an adult stem cell, and it's going to be in closely related cells. Okay, origin of stem cells are either adult stem cells or embryonic stem cells. Okay, adult stem cells are partially undifferentiated cells. So they would be in the specialized cells of many of the internal organs and tissues. Okay, the advantages, if they're taken from a patient, there's a low risk of rejection. The disadvantages, there's not a whole lot of them. They're few in number. They're hard to isolate, and they're more likely to have DNA damage. And as a result of DNA damage, they may have some complications down the line. Embryonic stem cells come from donated embryos. Now remember, an embryo is what happens after an egg gets fertilized. Okay, these are the result of IVF, or in vitro fertilization. The advantage is they're pluripotent, so they can turn into anything except a totipotent stem cell. They can be grown in culture indefinitely. The disadvantages are they might be rejected if they were put into a different organism, because that body would think it's foreign material. They can grow unchecked. And then there are ethical questions. You would be destroying the embryo. Okay, so this goes to that question of when does life begin, at fertilization, at birth, whatever. That's a discussion for another day, but there are ethical questions with biotechnology, this being one of them. Are you destroying an embryo? So research and treatment hope for use of stem cells. It can be used to study diseases, be able to treat new diseases and testing new medications. It would be much easier to test new medications on specific cell types grown from stem cells, as opposed to putting in a patient and potentially trying it with a clinical trial on a patient where you don't really know what type of adverse reactions could come from it. They have been used for bone marrow replacement for leukemia in patients and chemotherapy patients. There's some work with nerve cells for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, as well as spinal cord injuries. It can help out with heart muscle cells or heart blood vessel cells for heart disease, and pancreatic islet cells for diabetes, as well as the stuff that would be listed over here. A bunch of different possibilities of use of stem cells. And again, the way they could test them is working it on these specific types of tissues that would be affected by these diseases without actually trying it on an actual human being. So it would take away some of the risk of the development of the drugs that would be treated or used for treating these diseases.